For the AAE 1601 glider project, students were tasked to design, build, and test a small glider using balsa wood and Play-Doh. The project was intended to provide a very open-ended design problem. My solution was a glider aptly named Aerial AAA. Although students could be very creative with their glider design, it was required to fit within a 16-inch by 16-inch area. Some of the provided balsa wood had to be allocated to the stabilizers, thus reducing the possible wingspan. Additionally, the glider's target range was set at 20 feet, but students could definitely reach beyond 30 feet with enough testing. During the design process, students were reminded that the vehicle must possess characteristics of a glider. Such requirements discouraged students from throwing a ball of Play-Doh or a stick of balsa wood. Since I hoped to better understand fixed-wing flight, a willingness to find loopholes was unlikely. On fly-off day, the glider must also be hand-thrown. With the limited time allotted for the project, it would be much easier to perfect a throw than implement a remote control system. According to my aerodynamics notes, it seems straight, elliptical, and tapered wings were best suited for a glider. I knew it was important to maximize aspect ratio. However, the balsa wood was already so fragile that I did not want to slim down the width of the wing. While a straight wing would have made my calculation of aspect ratio trivial, the sharp tips created drag. An elliptical wing is great at minimizing induced drag at low flight speeds, but I realized that cutting the elliptical would take time, possibly limiting my days to test. Consequently, I decided to pursue a tapered wing, a compromise between the two options, because it reduced planform area without complicating construction. Spencer, a mentor in the Aero Makerspace, mentioned that mounting a wing roughly a third from the front of the aircraft is preferred, so I planned to stick to his advice and adjust the center of gravity using extra weight. The real question was where vertically on the fuselage should the wing be attached. I could mount the wing on top of the fuselage, to the bottom, or cut a slit in the middle and slide the wing through. Since it is best to throw from under the wing, I would have the most room on the fuselage to place my fingers in a high wing configuration. A mid-wing was my least favorite design because the wing was most likely to snap during initial testing and made adding dihedral difficult. There is not much difference in performance between high and low wings, but in a high wing configuration, the center of gravity is below the wing, so there is already some dihedral effect. The three primary adhesives available in the Aero Makerspace were superglue, hot glue, and tape. I ultimately employed a combination of the three. I attempted to use a lot of tape in the beginning so that it would be easy to move my wing and stabilizers if needed to achieve the correct center of gravity. The tape broke after every test flight, so I knew it would not be the best method. Once I was satisfied with my design, superglue became the clear option because it is quick to dry and works great with two word surfaces. However, there was none left in the Aero Makerspace and it proved less effective on tape surfaces. Hot glue was the next best alternative. Although it added a lot of weight and took more time to dry, it was readily available. Sizing the wings and stabilizers was a bit difficult. I wanted to keep the wings as large as possible so I could cut them down if needed and resist windy conditions. I studied images of gliders on the internet and the tiny glider used in the weight and balance activity to better understand what works and what does not. I determined the area of each stabilizer should be roughly 1/6 or 1/8 the area of the wing. It also seemed like the fuselage was shorter than the wingspan. However, I was afraid that I would lose a lot of stability because my wings were still wide and my aircraft was only hand-thrown. If the fuselage was very short, there would have been even more emphasis on getting the perfect throw due to the lack of weight. Consequently, I cut my fuselage at 16 inches. My initial glider design had a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square balsa wood fuselage. I planned to 3D print a rounded nose cap to reduce drag. The cap could also hold Play-Doh to adjust the center of gravity. I kept the stabilizer small in comparison to the wing so that the center of gravity was toward the front. My wingspan of 16 inches and ripcord of only 3 inches created a large aspect ratio. The tapered wing was mounted to the top of the fuselage so that I could easily adjust the angle of attack by shaving material off the top. The horizontal and vertical stabilizers had a slight taper on their front edge. The vertical stabilizer was glued to the top of the horizontal one so that I did not have to risk cutting a slit. Before balancing my vehicle, I decided to stay in the front of my fuselage instead of 3D printing a nose cap. After this initial change, the center of gravity sat slightly behind my wing, causing the glider to pitch up drastically when thrown. For this reason, I only tapered the back of my wing to keep as much material as possible at the front of my vehicle. After talking with Spencer in the Aero Makerspace, I remembered that the center of gravity should lie around the quarter chord of the airfoil, a point 1/4 down from the leading edge. This convention ensures that the center of gravity is slightly ahead of the neutral point of the aircraft. Reducing the height of my vertical stabilizer did not make a difference, so I added bits of Play-Doh to the nose of the glider until it bounced on my finger around the middle of the wing. With several test flights and minor adjustments, my glider achieved 20 feet indoors about half the time. Flights were inconsistent, but my wings were still taped together and the Play-Doh used as a counterweight fell off after every trial. Therefore, I instead used a AAA battery to move the center of gravity because it is easier to tape, thus inspiring me to name my glider Aerial AAA. I considered adding a dihedral angle to my wings. My glider did not have much stability while testing. If my throw was tilted slightly, the lift vector also tilted, causing the glider to sip in the direction of the tilt. Adding dihedral creates a horizontal component of lift that keeps the wings level when flying through turbulent air. Although dihedral causes more drag, my glider has thin airfoils. My solution involved taping the top portion of the wing, gluing the bottom wood surface to the fuselage, and propping the wings up on two objects with the same height while drying. I did a simple geometric calculation to get a 5-degree dihedral angle. My final glider featured a 16-inch long balsa wood fuselage with a rounded nose. The 5-degree dihedral wing, positioned a third of the way down on the top of the fuselage, had a 16-inch wingspan and a 1-inch taper at the tail. A front-tapered vertical stabilizer that was 2 inches tall was secured in a slit cut at the back of the fuselage. The horizontal stabilizer had a span of 6 inches and a half-inch taper. It slid around the back of the vertical stabilizer. A AAA battery was tapered in front of the wing, while the other components were secured using superglue or hot glue. On fly-off day, the furthest recorded flight was 25 feet. I estimated the coefficient of lift to be 1.66 and the coefficient of drag to be 0.156. My glider's center of gravity is at the half chord of my wing, or roughly 7 inches from the front of my vehicle. It is about a quarter chord behind the conventional measurement. Despite the discrepancy, my glider still flies quite level. My design iterations improved the final performance on fly-off day. I went from a glider that inconsistently flew 20 feet after balancing to one capable of 30 to 40 feet indoors. While the battery remained stuck to the fuselage and kept my glider balanced, I had some reliability issues with my dihedral wing, despite its improved performance. My glider experienced plenty of crashes or hard landings during testing. The fuselage became so weak that it snapped into thirds just before the fly-off. Due to the cold temperature and lack of superglue, I had to resort to taping my glider back together right before the competition. The temporary fix could have hurt my final performance. The glider project was very rewarding. Unlike the model rocket, students were starting from scratch. Although given some balsa wood materials, they were required to think deeply about the principles that allow a glider to fly without propulsion. Students were forced to apply the aerodynamics information learned during AE 1601 lectures. Seeing how the location of the center of gravity, dihedral wings, and different stabilizers affected the flight of my glider made the information much more memorable. The competition format also filled the project with excitement. Without introducing a new design, Aerial AAA could be further improved by slightly decreasing the size of the horizontal and vertical stabilizers so that I do not have to add as much weight to the front of my vehicle. I found that all the additional weight meant that I had to throw the glider harder, thus increasing the risk of a detrimental crash. Additionally, I could improve the consistency and strength of my dihedral angle by making a half cut and bending the wing with some water instead of cutting the wing entirely in half. Here are my references.